furthermore, he's saying that this is the irony of our vulnerability, that we failed, our industry, our economy, fallen behind defending the one thing they rely on most, technology, and this creates a window of opportunity for terrorists. And again, terrorists like to replicate, terrorists don't necessarily like to reinvent things, they like to look at what happened, but they also like to look at things that will surpass the most spectacular event. So the most spectacular event in history of terrorist attacks in modern history is 9/11. How do you surpass this spectacular event? How do you create an event that will be much more catastrophic in nature, if not through cyber terrorism? So a couple of quick questions. Again, just one more before this, because it's also going somehow around 1980s. We had all these people who are really thinking about this in a very practical way. So Cooperman and Trent believe that the problem with technological terrorism has generally been ignored, and US government is underprepared to deal with technological threat. So it was really very peculiar to me and really of concern that I received this email today from the Dutch colleague saying, you are not taking it seriously. You're not taking it seriously 33 years after scholars alert American public, we are not taking it seriously, we are not prepared. So the question becomes, are we under siege? And yes and no, in the sense that, again, we have a number of responses to this, and I'm going to speed up the responses as time is flying. On one end, Internet was not designed to be secure, and so it's so it makes sense that we are sort of lagging behind, and we are not necessarily responding in a preventive manner, in a proactive manner that we would want to. And because we're not responding, we have to look at alternatives, because the technological alternatives are not there. Therefore, we have to look at something else, and this is, to me at least, some sort of eclectic response on the part of public and private law enforcement and other entities. The other thing, we are using Al-Qaeda as an example. Even though it might be something, and this is Al-Qaeda as the major threat that we still contemplate as the major threat to United States security, which there no longer are, but we are still operating in this frame of mind as the Islamic terrorism is the ultimate threat to United States. Al-Qaeda's manual says, it's nice that it's much more preferred for us to see blood than anything else, but we can have a combination of blood and shutting down of infrastructure, and this will be actually the ultimate attack. Skipping a little bit here, and the skies are falling, but again, let's see how the Dutch are responding to the falling skies. And this is a model that was literally released to the public in October 29, 2013. So I'm taking you from the Ashurian Empire to literally few weeks ago, a product of working on this and refining this for years. 130 partners that will deal with response to counterterrorism, and again, what's important here is this last bullet here. So basically, what do they mean? If you are responsible for anything from the physical standpoint, so for example, if you are the president of this college and you're responsible for the physical facilities here, you're also responsible for anything and everything that can happen to this college as far as cyber is concerned. So this is identifying these new responsibilities and saying, you don't just own a business. You don't just own a university or a president of a university. You don't just exchange emails with your friends. You have to step up and pick up the responsibility for whatever might happen. And whenever you step up and pick up this responsibility, it might be translated into various ways of response. It can be the physical security of creating various encryptions and firewalls. It might be limiting the amount of information that you put out there. It might be preparing paper, literally tons of files to back up the systems. Because I already talked to a number of banking industries and I asked them, okay, tomorrow everything goes down. Nobody can access electronically any of the information in the bank. Where is the backup system? Oh yeah, we have the backup system. Is it electronic? Yes, it's electronic. Okay, I have a follow-up question. What happens if the backup system goes down? Do you have paper? Do you have paper for the most critical information that you will need to restore people's savings, people's money? Guess what? Do they have it? They don't have it because it's an issue of storage, and storage costs money. So they don't have it. So if the backup system goes, you know, we are on the street here begging for mercy. This is unfortunately what it is. So what the Dutch propose? Who and when is responsible for what? They have 5 objectives, and these 5 objectives basically will guide, and they're identified in terms of when these objectives have to be accomplished, and most of them should be accomplished by the end of 2016, so we're looking at 3 years from now, which is a long period of time, considering the fact that we are facing a major threat, but on the other hand, better than what we have here, because we don't have it here. So first of all, the first one is the development of relevant infrastructure. So this is what I just gave you an example of. It's not just I have a backup system that is equally electronic and can be put down, but something that can be accessed as in an alternative way. So obviously it doesn't include the issues of storage, because storage has to be configured into this. The second is legislation, and you are the expert on legislation. We are far behind in terms of controlling the cyberspace and protecting ourselves. By the way, both China, which of course we don't want to be like China, but the Australians are very much involved right now in policing the cyberspace. I don't know how many of you heard about the plastic gun that was on the internet during the summer, a gun that can be printed in a 3D printer without any metal. You can walk through an airport security using this gun. It appeared for the first time on the South West Wales Police Force website. They spotted it. The next day, they closed the website. They had the authority. 100,000 people downloaded the plans of this gun until they closed it down. And they didn't spot it immediately. It took a day or so. But they have the authority, the legal authority at this point, to shut down the website that advertises a gun that can be right now produced by anybody and cross any security. So this legislation is in place in Australia. We don't have it. We were just reporting on CNN about this, but nobody was doing, no law enforcement agency was doing anything to shut down the website here. Investment in ICT secure products and services. This is the development, infusing money into development of various encryption systems, firewalls, anything and everything that can help minimize, mitigate the attack. When we talk about counterterrorism and counterterrorism response, I always emphasize one thing. We can never eliminate, we can never prevent anything, everything, or even majority of the attacks. What we can do is mitigate, minimize, control the damage. That's what we can do. So infusing money into this, into various encryption technologies, into firewalls, it's a very important part of mitigation, not elimination, but mitigation. Building coalition for digital domains. This is cooperation, real cooperation with countries around the world. That needs to be taken. This is something that needs to be taken into consideration because, again, it transcends the whole issue of local law enforcement can deal with it because it cannot. As we all know quite well that a terrorist attack can be perpetrated from Indonesia and happen here. And finally, investing in research more and more and more research that will include, again, various types of responses, not necessarily the ICT responses, but responses from again, engaging universities, engaging think tanks in developing the level of knowledge that is necessary. This is the high-tech thinking as far as counterterrorism response is concerned, which is a very innovative concept, because so far high-tech response to a real threat, a real attack, is the domain of the military. And it was never a domain of law enforcement, whether private or public. So it's the first time that we're seeing the elevation of the threat to the level that it's treated like a military threat, but will be dealt with by local response. There is another agency that's dealing with another plan, the Cybersecurity Assessment that was just released also this year by the Dutch. And what I put here in red, because this is what really guides me in terms of conceptual thinking about this, that the National Police Services Agency, which is the newly centralized 26 police forces of the Netherlands, are going to be one part working together with military intelligence. This is something, for example, that I constantly emphasize, that we live in times that we have to re-examine various laws of this country. One of them is posse comitatus, that prevents local law enforcement from working with the military, or the military working with local law enforcement, other than National Guard and the Coast Guard, but they're excluded for a variety of reasons, but they are not necessarily the ones with the knowledge. We need this collaboration with the military to be able to respond locally. We need the knowledge, we need the skill, we need this togetherness in terms of effective response, and this is just, again, in addition to other intel agencies. The 17 national intel agencies that we have here do not work on a daily basis with local police department and their cyber response. If they work sometimes, it's good. If they work sometimes with the fusion centers that we have 70 around the country, that's another response that's not necessarily effective. We're lucky, but it's not something that's ongoing. So, a little bit about future research. Before I show you very quickly how I view the proper response. Bullet number 2, what are the targets? What are the virtual environments that we need to be concerned with? We need to have some sort of priority list in terms of our response. What we're facing right now is what's referred to in literature as digital tsunami. What is a digital tsunami? We have an overload of information, overload of intel. We don't necessarily know what to focus on, and we do need to have an equivalent of hotspots in policing. You know what hotspots are in policing? Hotspots are areas that police departments identify as areas that are saturated by criminal activity, and this is where the deployment goes, and this is when the intervention goes. We need to identify these hotspots as far as our infrastructure is concerned. We need to identify the hotspots as far as our ability to respond to the aftermath. One of the things that bothers me more than anything else is not just our inability to prevent, but our inability and lack of allocation of resources to the aftermath of an event that will happen sooner or later, okay? So, just very quickly about the conceptual framework that I have. So what I'm trying to do, and this is not necessarily my idea, this is something when I started studying things for 1995, 1996 for the high-tech crime, thinking, how can we, the way we're recruiting people today to law enforcement, whether it's local or federal in general, how can we be prepared for cyber attack? And the idea is that we can dramatically and drastically have to change the way we recruit, select, and train police officers, or we have to completely abandon this idea and start looking at allocation of these resources to to the development of robust contingency plans for the aftermath of a mega cyber attack. And this, to me, is something that probably we can be much more effective in, no matter how much money is allocated to fighting cyber terrorist attacks. So where do we start? So first of all, looking at the cyber as a theater of war for law enforcement, whether private or public. In order to tackle it properly, we need to look at these three angles. We need to look who we're recruiting, in other words, where are you casting the net, how we're selecting the people, and how we're training them. Now, one of the things that we were exposed to recently is what I refer to the Snowden Syndrome, right? We all know who Snowden is, the guy who basically now is publicizing the way we respond to terrorist threats to whoever is willing to listen. So this is where I'm going with this. How do we how do we recruit, select, and train the next cyber Praetorian guards, this is how I refer to them, to avoid the Snowden syndrome? Because if we're going to devote all these resources and so in allocation of these resources, and at the same time we're going to recruit people like Snowden, then we'll have a problem bigger than what we can envision. So I'm replacing cyber with integrity, because we do need to start looking at people who we're going to recruit to these units, looking at their work experience, looking at their age, looking at their education. What do they have that gives us some sort of indication that they are the proper people? And by the way, as I mentioned before, the idea of recruiting the cyber cops instead of regular cops was introduced about 12 years ago in a book by Sawyers and others, saying any police department like NYPD, for example, recruits a year 2,000 cops. We recruit them based, first of all, we look at how many push-ups can you do in a minute? How fast can you run? Okay, great. Next stage. Well, of course, the push-ups and the running have nothing to do with cyber. But this is how we recruit in the United States. We recruit everybody to be a patrol officer, and then they can go to other units. Yes, we do recruit civilian analysts. I am not for recruitment of civilian analysts. I don't necessarily believe in this, and again, Snowden is a prime example. You have to be part of law enforcement the same way as sworn officers are, to understand various things, to understand various logistics, to have some sort of a commitment to the organization that unfortunately the civilian analysts do not have the same way as sworn officers, and we've seen it over and over. So looking at this and looking at who we're going to select, right now, when we're recruiting police officers, we look at what's available. We don't necessarily look at their professionalism as far as facing the next threat as far as cyber is concerned, and also political consideration. Unfortunately, we select people, we go by affirmative action. I'm saying unfortunately, even though I fall within affirmative action as well. You know, I'm a woman in a men's profession, but I'm the first one to say it's about what I can do and not what gender or ethnic background I represent. We are under a threat. We are under a siege. Yes, we are. Are the skies are falling? Yes. I didn't have the time to discuss it, why they're falling. Yes, they are falling. And once the skies are falling, then we have to put aside very noble considerations and see who are the people that are going to represent the proper response. 1,500 or 2,000 police officers who can do the push-ups and run very quickly, recruited every year, versus 2,000 computer nerds, as Sawyer and others referred to them 11, 12 years ago. What kind of difference we would have? We would have a huge difference. Is it going to happen? I'm not sure, but at least we should try, because if we're not going to try, we're going to find ourselves in a predicament that would put us out there together on the list with the Ashurians and the Incas and the ancient Egyptians and whatnot. Finally, you know, in terms of training. How are we going to train these individuals? They come with certain knowledge. We tend to train people in-house and give them the level of knowledge that in-house agency thinks is appropriate. It's much larger than in-house. It's much larger than regional. It's much larger than state, much larger than country. It is an international issue. So we have to rethink this type of training. And again, looking at the Dutch model, and I truly, if you're interested, send me an email. I send you a link to this strategy. It has 36 pages, but it has like 5 pages that are really identifying who is supposed to do what and how it can be accomplished. And it's something that I think is our way to go. And if any of you here has anything to say about this, please do. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Hello? Are there any questions?
Maki, I was wondering, I was struck by, if you look at the documents revealed by Snowden, it looks to me like a lot of the NSA strategy is directly counter to what you're advocating, because you talk about hotspots, they talk about collecting anything and everything because one day it may be relevant. You talk about protecting encryption, and one of the major efforts of the NSA, of course, has been to weaken encryption at the point where Nature, one of the 2 top science magazines in the country, actually wrote that every mathematician working for the NSA on that should be ashamed of him or herself because they managed to pretty much defeat the backbone of the internet.
Yeah. Well, again, it's a very complicated notion, the whole notion of, looking at everybody and then versus focusing on hotspot. But hotspot can be as invasive as looking at everybody. And I always say, and I know you have a class, some of you, so feel free to leave. Democracy and principles of democracy, I fight for, and to the point. And I always said, democracy is great as long as you're alive. When you're dead, it's not that great. And if everybody is dead, it's even less great. So, I have no real answer in terms of what NSA is doing. I think what NSA is doing is primarily an outcome of the 30 or 40 or 50 years of confusion, of not knowing really what you're looking at and for. And that's why I started with the definitions. I want to protect the infrastructure. It's nice if I can also prevent another 9/11, but 9/11 is not the priority number 1 for me. What priority number 1 for me is the electricity, the water, the food supply, the hospitals. These are the catastrophic events that we should be focusing on. If we cannot,
Just for devil's advocate, it could become like she was saying, like a Nazi Germany where your freedom or your rights are totally restricted. That could very easily be the case as well.
Well, again, if you are focusing on securing the infrastructure and you are looking for people who are exchanging information about, hurting the infrastructure, then it's very different from if you are looking at people who are talking about, things that are unrelated. And I'll give you an example. I worked for 4 years for the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration. What I've done for them, I was listening to wiretaps of suspected drug dealers for hours and hours of wiretaps. I had a lot of stuff that was completely unrelated. But I also heard things that were related, because if if I'm a drug dealer, you calling me, you're just my student, you calling me in a legitimate way, we can have why should I be listening, why should somebody be listening to our conversation? But here Sadina is calling me, and she's another drug dealer. So it's
a gray area.
It's a gray area, but not so much when and for a reason I put a gray background on the slides, is because yes it is and no it's not, because it's gray up to the point when it doesn't become apocalyptic. When it becomes an apocalyptic threat, the potential is catastrophic, then to me it's not gray anymore.
Another question.
Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
The group Anonymous has attempted to enter federal sites, and all they've really seemed to be able to do so far is set up like a denial service inside there. And they've also entered a couple of newspapers, actually computer intranet systems, and changed articles in there. How do you rate their success, or if they've had any kind of real-time impact on life so far?
Unfortunately, I have to say that I don't rate anybody's success at this point, including the Dutch government, as anything that I can look at and say, this is for sure something to emulate and continue this way on this path because this is successful. I think that we have a completely piecemeal approach to everything that can generate, limited success at any given moment. But as far as the mega threat is concerned, and again, this is what I'm talking about, this is not a success of one organization, of one entity. This is by default can be only a success of hundreds of entities, both private and public, the military. I mean, there is nothing, I cannot look at anything that I'm looking today at and see, okay, this is success. This is, I don't want to degrade my colleagues' successes, but I'm known for having my own opinions. The whole issue of ceasefire, I don't know if you're familiar with that, departments are buying guns off the streets and minimizing, gang activity. Whenever you have an intervention, it works for a period of time. Look at this 5 years later. Look at this 10 years later. The success is not the same as it was, and give it a little bit more time and there's no success. This is why I said at the beginning, my background as a criminologist doesn't give me much of a hope in terms of people will stop trying to create, be involved in criminal activities or thinking about creating mega terrorist attacks. We will see more and more. So hard for me to really give praise to anything, because I think that even though it might sound cynical, I'd rather not give praise to a piecemeal response, because I don't believe in a piecemeal response.
Any other questions?
Hi. Also enjoyed the presentation. Do you think that part of the rhetorical strategy for linking military resources with police resources is connecting cyber warfare, like a Chinese state intervention against the United States, with cyber terrorism non-state actors? Do you think that's maybe how we get over that that divide between military and police efforts?
Again, I think that the only way we can get over it is to re-examine our laws, because the threat is elevated to the point that the laws are just behind, and we constantly, when we teach about the legal system, whether it's the laws in the United States and many countries in Europe, whether it's Germany or Holland or the French or the Brits, they change completely their various laws to respond to terrorist attacks. Suddenly, and these are the terrorist attacks that were just, the peripheral terrorist attacks. So the response has to start with the change in our legal system, because this is part of the democracy I believe in. You change the laws, and then you move into tactics. And combining military and law enforcement, to me, is a tactic. Changing the law is a strategy.
Professor, it's a similar question. Coming back to the plastic gun that you're talking about. If something physical abroad was threatening the safety and security of American citizens, we would feel compelled to go forward and do something about that, even if it did breach jurisdictional boundaries, and probably you would term that cyber warfare. Do you think, when you were given that example, that's the kind of thing that should have happened, and do we, with that with that cooperation between law enforcement and military, need to look at those kind of things where we pursue across boundaries to take cyber threats on?
Oh, definitely. I mean, this is not, it became a cliche. Everybody's talking about global international crime and comparative crime, nothing is just, us by itself as United States or them as Australians or, them as Turkey or Holland. It is, we are all interrelated as far as economies are concerned, as far as our well-being is concerned. I was mesmerized by the account of the head of the New South Wales Police when he was saying how quickly they shut down the website. I said, this is exactly what we need. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is something that we need to have legislation for. Something like this happened. This is something that before we even think about what kind of machine we need to introduce to TSA to be able to screen this, 5 people are already printing the stuff and hijacking, 777s around the world and creating mayhem. 100,000 people downloading this within one day. If only 1% of them have malicious intentions, you know where we are.
Any other questions?
Basically, my question is, should we give up freedom of speech for cybersecurity?
Again, it's not about freedom of speech. If I put out there on the web a weapon that potentially can cause lives of thousands upon thousands of people, it's not about freedom of speech. We do have, within the freedom of speech amendment, we have some ability restrictions. If you preach things on the internet or wherever saying, I'm going to kill him or her, no more freedom of speech. We can come and arrest you. If you put out there a weapon that can take down an airplane, that's not freedom of speech anymore. So,
What about how do I put this, interstate terrorism, like the growth of Nazism, the growth of supremacyism?
We have according to recent research, Thousands of the Law Center, we have about 1,000 hate groups operating in the United States right now. Most of them have websites. If you go to any of their websites, the level of hatred that they have out there, to me, it's flabbergasting that they're in existence, that they don't shut their websites. But as long as they are not putting out there, a blueprint for a plastic gun, I would say, what I would say doesn't matter. I would shut them down. The moment they say, you are the son of Satan and they are the son of devil and then only we are the pure ones, I would shut them down. But this is something I am willing to argue about. But somebody putting out there a plastic weapon that somebody can print out tomorrow, I don't wait for a judge's order or warrant, search warrant to shut them down. Because this is not how you act when you're facing a real threat. In the military, when you're facing a threat, you take the threat down. That's how we're supposed to respond.
Any other questions? We have time for one more. I just have one quick one then. About a month and a half ago, I guess, the FBI took down a major site in Iceland, run actually by an American citizen, that was dealing in all sorts of contraband goods and providing a drug market that would connect, let's say, local buyers and sellers throughout the world. And it was very successful. It was operated with Bitcoin. It was taken down. It took the FBI about 2.5 years of investigation to take this site down. It's back up now, maybe 30 days, 40 days afterwards. This site's similar with a lot of the information that was on the original site. It's been brought right back up. Is there any hope at all without some type of regulatory regime overseeing the entire internet that all nations buy into?
Well, that's the idea that the Dutch are presenting of creating, this is I think number 4 there, of creating this environment that nations will buy into, and this piece that will serve as a blueprint of addressing it on an international level. This is what Europol is trying to do with their strategy. I didn't even talk about it, but they again evolved a very intricate strategy of dealing with this. So in Europe, that of course has to expand beyond that because terrorist targets in Europe can be, attacked from Singapore, for that matter. The hope is, the same as do we have the hope that one day we're going to live in a world free of crime? No, I don't think any of us has this hope. The hope is that we are, and I think I mentioned it, that we are prepared to minimize and to respond properly in the aftermath. That's my hope, and that's why I don't necessarily believe in recruiting this 2,000 or 2 million Praetorian guards to law enforcement, cyber Praetorian. I believe in putting law enforcement in a position of responding to the aftermath, which they're not. They're absolutely not today.
Let's thank Professor Haberfeld for a really exciting talk. Thank you.